Fuck it, we'll do it live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
We're doing it live. Fuck it.
So,
That's us. Tonight on Stumbling Down History Road, we have a really cool guest who's willing to entertain us, and I'm very happy with that. We're going to be talking about Celebrity Deathmatch and a little bit of the things that you kind of got into and are still doing. So, semi-soft interview, mostly talking about Celebrity Deathmatch, the history of it, you know. I'm Jackson.
I'm Garrett.
I'm D.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Carl Paolino, and I guess I'm here because of Celebrity Deathmatch. It's one of those shows, the late 90s, early 2000s, that is iconic and a lot of people remember. So I'm happy to talk about it. I could talk about it for hours, but that may get boring. So maybe we could do a question and answer thing, and then you could. I'll be happy to just jump right in.
Okay. Let's cover a brief little history and a little overview of what it does. It started in, what was it, September of 1997? I know that there was the soft premiere during, I believe it was The Head from another Eric Vogel thing, just like a little itty bitty soft premiere, and then it actually got released in 1998. But I believe they just had like a little onesie-twosie skits in 97 during The Head. But it is a MTV animation TV show that, as stated, kind of like took over and grew in popularity in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was just about parodying. Words are hard sometimes.
Celebrity.
All of the like growing celebrity nonsense, like Celebrity Jeopardy, this American Gladiator, got to put celebrities on with this, got to do the Osbournes, got to do.
They had a celebrity, it was kind of like a spin. I don't know if you guys saw the celebrity rap battles.
Yep.
That was like kind of like a spin off, but like that was basically born from what you guys were doing.
Yeah, and it more or less kind of just was this parody of celebrity boxing, celebrity fight clubs, which were actually celebrity boxing, which Logan Paul you can't take credit for. Sorry.
Which is actually weird because they say that sometimes life imitates art, and sometimes things like Simpsons is one of the big ones that kind of predicted a lot of things that are happening now in pop culture and stuff, and they get a lot of credit for it. But I don't know if anybody really gives credit for the current celebrity death matches that are actually going on, that are being put together. I mean, now you have two billionaires that are fighting each other. You have
Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. They're talking about trying to get a fight club. It's nuts.
How cool would have that been? If you guys were able to do something like that back then. You did like a Zuckerberg versus Elon Musk celebrity death match claymation thing.
Zuck is going. If they actually fight, Zuck's going to destroy Elon. But he actually has medals in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and stuff now.
So we've kind of spoke like 100 words. Maybe we should
Sorry.
But Carl, kind of give us an insight.
Are we in the right direction so far?
Yeah, actually you are. Just let me ask you this. I got the window open. If you're hearing any car noises, I could close it, or is my voice good?
No, you're good.
No, you're perfect.
Yeah.
No, you're perfect.
Okay, so I like your intro. I think you did your homework well. I probably wouldn't have remembered half of that, but as you're saying it, I'm remembering, the era and what was going on at the time. Yes, absolutely. So where the place that I fit into this was, I had my own studio off of 9th Avenue in Manhattan, and I had gotten a reputation in the area for being a puppet builder of various types for television commercials, feature films, and I got a call from the producer because they were doing other shows. You mentioned The Head, which was on MTV. MTV was doing a lot of amazing animated shows at the time. There was a show called The Max. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was based on a comic book. It was really cool, very dramatic illustration. There was Daria, which is, very different. But Daria was great. I love Daria.
That's such a good show. Absolutely.
And the idea was to try to bring stop motion animation into MTV. And at the time, we didn't have the technology we have today. You guys can shoot stop motion on your phone. Back then we were pretty much still shooting with 35 millimeter cameras. We were shooting film, and there were some people shooting digital, but it hadn't come to the point where we can really do it. So MTV kind of pioneered a lot of this, that they found the right software to shoot puppets. But what they couldn't seem to figure out at the time, so I'm told, that how to make a claymation puppet, because clay, as you know, it's very heavy. I mean, you can almost imagine, it's almost imagine pizza dough. It's very heavy. Try to animate pizza dough. It's very floppy. So the idea was to make it look like clay, but the characters had to stand up on their own. They had to be manipulated a little bit, take frames of film.
They would have some wireframes helping to support them, right?
So did you guys?
Yes, there were wireframes inside, and they had nuts and bolts in the feet. So we actually bolted them to the stage so the animators could actually position them, take a frame of film, and position them and take a frame of film.
Did you guys actually create like a specific clay? Like, I'm sure it wasn't on-market clay that was able to withstand all the sculpting and movement.
The high heat from all the lights, because there wasn't LEDs back then.
So did you guys have to kind of like, before you were even able to put the whole entire idea into motion, come up with an actual substance, clay being the form? Like, did you come up with something particular to do that, or was there something that you kind of molded together with other things?
So to begin with, what Jackson said was that there were no LEDs back then used in film lighting. So the lights that we used were so unbelievably hot. Yes, they would melt clay. So the studios that did shoot clay animation, they actually refrigerated the areas where the people were shooting, because the clay would melt. So what we did that was different was we only used clay as a replacement of the characters if they had to get their heads smashed or their limbs torn off or something like
a little
this.
bit more malleable.
Oh, well, no, what we used foam rubber. We actually cast the characters in foam rubber because it was very lightweight. It's like what's in the cushion of your sofa or your chair.
Okay.
So we would actually sculpt the character in clay, make a mold out of hard plaster. When that gets opened, you take out the clay, you put in the wire armature, and then we cast foam rubber latex inside the mold, put it into an oven, bake it for 5 hours, pull it out, let it cool for an hour, open it up, pull out the foam rubber piece. And sometimes it didn't, like a good souffle or a bad souffle, it didn't really work. It had bubbles, and then we'd have to start all over again. It was a very long process. I had spent many evenings sleeping on the floor of the studio, waiting for the oven to finish baking so we could open it up, pull out the puppets. If they look good, then we got to go home. Come in the next day and clean them up.
I mean, I'm sure some of those failures could have been used for like damage models. Like the bubbles could have been used for burn damage, possibly.
Yes, actually, what they ended up using was the foam rubber puppets got destroyed by the animators. If somebody had their arm torn off or something like this, or once the puppets break, it's very difficult to repair them. You really need a brand new puppet. So they used a lot of the limbs and things for carnage. Like, if they had a pile of carnage on the floor, you probably remember shots of that.
Yeah.
They did things like that, and you could only reuse so much. But if you want the puppet to look decent on camera, you really needed to start with a brand new puppet. And the animators, they were ruthless. They just hated the puppets.
Oh yeah, I mean, because the actions and stuff that were happening,
it was gory. It was really gory,
Yeah.
especially for the 90s and 2000s.
Oh, absolutely, because like stuff like that you didn't see on TV. Like, to that extent, you didn't really see that much blood and guts and gore and like limbs being ripped off and I guess it was
Yeah.
it was like
It was safe for like adult stuff, effectively.
So playing on that, for the like per like each individual celebrity per se, roughly how many puppets would you make per like? It'll take say Christian Bale. Like how many Christian Bales did you have to make for that where he fights Adam West?
Did it depend on each episode?
Yeah, the general order for each character was 2 puppets, but
Okay.
sometimes they would request 3 or 4 of the same character for just that reason. If they knew the puppet was going to be destroyed, or if they knew they had more than one camera set up, so there would be 2 animators working at the same time, because otherwise you couldn't make that harsh deadline. Like every 2 weeks they were making a new episode.
Yeah.
So they used to, like, I would be making puppets and for episode 7, but episode 6 was probably being animated. Episode 5 was in post-production, so they would be able to release 4 episodes. And I remember then the next 4 weeks would be a rerun of those episodes, and then there would be 4 new ones and 4 repeats and 4 new ones and 4 repeats. So yeah,
Slightly different than the usual season that we see these days.
Because it just
this was early on where they could actually make as many episodes as they want, or as few as they want, and call it a season.
Yeah,
it used to be a specific number, but it's changed since then.
Even before before streaming really was wilding, because you'd be looking at like, you go back and look at older shows, and they'll have like 150, 200 episodes, and only be considered like 2 or 3 seasons at most.
Yeah.
And they're just pumped. Like I think I Love Lucy is like 75 episodes and only like 2 technically seasons.
Yeah, I know that.
That's crazy.
Doing some of the research, I know that Celebrity Deathmatch had some seasons that were 25 episodes, some that were only like 18, things like that, and it just kind of like bounced around a little bit.
So
That sounds right. That sounds right. I think something Garrett was saying about the cutting edge element of the murder that took place every episode. It's funny. Yeah, they really got away with murder.
Yeah.
But one of the things that came down from the legal department of MTV, or maybe it was Paramount, maybe it was Viacom, but we weren't allowed to use a red paint to simulate blood. We had to come up with a color that was not bright red like Jackson's shirt there. It had to be a slightly orange color whenever they used blood. And I thought, we're tearing off people's heads and you're worried about the color.
you're worried about the color of the blood coming out of the gory head. It's like semantics, but it's like almost like
that's unfortunately what happened with like the FCC, and it just kind of changed as you went through different iterations. I mean, look at what happened post Super Bowl with Janet Jackson. It just all cracked down. But before that, there was things about, you can't market things to kids, no more commercials. So we ended up getting the 80s cartoon boom with like, oh, look, here's G.I. Joe, here's Care Bears, here's the hottest toy, and this is why you need to care, because it's a cartoon and you love this cartoon. It's nuts. Just the evolution of TV and effectively marketing to kids.
How things are marketed and what's being able to market to.
The FCC won't let you be.
No, the FCC won't let me be. Now let
So
I do have a quick question.
Sure.
I see something kind of behind your head. What is that?
That?
If you want to.
Oh, okay. So that's the cover to my my first publication as Comic Book Kid Publishing. That's Spontanea. That's my comic book series.
Nice.
So it's like, rather than look at my busy wall of notes and and calendar, I just put my my poster up.
That's awesome.
So tell us a little bit about
Go backwards there. Spontanea. So I'm sorry. What was your question?
tell us a little bit about the comic and how people can find it and
Sure.
what it's about.
Plug some stuff.
I did have one question.
We'll circle back to Celebrity Deathmatch as long as He's
Sure.
willing to entertain us.
Yeah,
Sure.
no, let's talk about, because this is current, this is now. Let's let the people know that.
It is. I mean, I've always been a fan of comic books. I've always read them. I got away from them for a long time. And as COVID began and production work in film production started shutting down, I felt like I needed a new creative outlet. So I created a publishing company, which is Comic Book Kid Publishing. That's easy to find, comicbookkidpub.com. And or if you just type in my name in Comic Book Kid, you'll find something connecting you to Spontanea. So Spontanea is the first character that I created a comic book about, and she takes place in a fictitious town upstate New York called Tranquility, and strange things are happening at night. They're seeing monsters and mechanical creatures roaming the streets. It just so happens that a lot of high-tech companies have moved into town. So it becomes a mystery as to where this is, how this is happening. And there are several new tech inventions that are being stolen from the tech companies. And it all comes together. And I've created this street level young adult book called Spontanea. And it's all masked hero, street level superhero stuff. And I think you could find it in many comic book stores out here on Long Island, or you can contact me directly at Comic Book Kid Publishing. And I'm starting to do a lot of shows now. I just did the Hot Flips collectible show this past weekend. Well, that was yesterday because today's Sunday. And next weekend in Sayville, they have their annual summer festival. I don't know if you guys have ever gone there. I never have, but I'm told it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of things going on. And special thanks to Anthony of Android's Amazing Comics in Sayville. He's going to host me as a comic book creator, and I'm going to be autographing books. So there's a big plug for Sayville as well.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool.
So this kind of follows suit along with that and tying it back into Celebrity Deathmatch.
Still my question.
I don't know what your question is going to be for this. Did they ever let you write any episodes or co-write any episodes?
No, I never got to write anything. They did periodically have like these little contests they would circulate among the production staff and say, anybody have any ideas, who you'd like to see fight someone else? And I don't know of anybody who actually sent anything in that, and they say, that they used it. But no, it was a producer, writer, director team that, as far as I know, they wrote, produced, and directed the episodes.
Okay, so it was all part of like Eric Fogel's wheelhouse type of a thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think I met Eric once. Honestly, I can't remember. It was a very busy time. I worked with the producer mostly, and once they agreed to the production line that I wanted to create, which was making the characters out of foam rubber, so that they can be manipulated without being destroyed, it became a regular weekly grind. It was, I had a studio of like 3-4 people, and by the time I got done working with Celebrity Deathmatch, I think I had a studio of about 22 people, and we just would sit around all day, crack jokes, listen to music, paint puppets, make puppets every day. It was like the Dunkin' Donuts commercial, time to make the puppets. We would just go in, and it was either sculpting the puppet or making a mold, casting it, painting it, detailing it, and then we'd ship them off to MTV, which was about, I'm going to say about 3-4 blocks away. They were in the Paramount building, that great big black building on Broadway.
So then, just to kind of answer what you were going to say, then I had a question that Jackson didn't steal from me. So what you're saying is basically all of the puppets were created in like a studio, and then they were brought to somewhere else. So you didn't even get to see like the destruction. Like, did you guys actually see like all these the creators and stuff when they're like?
Did you watch your babies at work?
Yeah, like did you guys? Yeah, like did you, or was that kind of just like, all right, well, I did my part. Now I'll see it on TV type thing.
No, actually, I had a standing invitation to come by and visit and watch them shoot. But if you know anything about how stop motion works, you basically have a character, and it's bolted down to a stage, and then the animator just makes one little movement and has to get out of the way and takes 1 or 2 frames of film, and then he goes back in and he makes another little movement. So it's like watching paint dry.
Yeah.
It's really, it's like watching a bridge rust. It's like watching a chess game is probably more exciting. But it's real exciting to the animator because they're in their head, they're thinking this is going to be a fast punch or a slow punch, and they're getting all excited about what they're doing. At the end of a long day, maybe they shot 5 seconds of film, something like this.
So that was actually another question that I was going to ask. But so I mean, like you said, it was like a very tedious process to do. But with all this stuff happening and like the lights and everything, did they kind of need a quote unquote creator medic type person there who can like oversee and like make an adjustment on the fly if something kind of broke before it was supposed to? Like, was there somebody that was there that like wasn't you, but somebody on your team that was responsible for those things?
Yes and no. Yes, they absolutely had people to do that. They were usually the animators. The animators were they were good jacks of all trade. Primarily, it was their job to move the puppets around, but they were great at last second fixing things, like an arm broke. Because the wire inside the bodies, they would break.
Yeah.
Sometimes literally in the middle of a shot, and the arm would go limp. It would just like hang, and they would use wire and thread and any tape, anything they could to get through the shot and then replace the puppet. But usually they call this a puppet hospital whenever something like this happens. And like you got your broken puppets and they got to go to the puppet hospital. And there's usually some intern there like pulling his hair out, trying to glue things back together so the animator could finish his shot. But the animators were very clever. They found ways constantly of I remember one shot, I could tell you one shot, there was a character that was punching somebody, like beating them up, and then one of the wires in their arm broke, so they put that arm behind his back, and he continued punching with one hand. And it looked great. It was a great visual image, but if you didn't know why he did it, you wouldn't realize how clever it was. But it was because the puppet broke, and he wanted to get done, and he wanted to go home,
So,
No, what were you gonna say?
so now, what got you into doing like the special effects and like puppet work for this type of stuff? Was it like a particular movie or show or creator or something?
Were you always kind of creative, and you're just like,
yeah.
this is the only actor that'll accept me?
So to just really roll back the clock here. So I was the kid who had cardboard and contact paper and wrapping it around my body and making my first Iron Man costume back in many, many decades ago. So I always had that great feeling for I wanted to build things. I was very good at making things with my hands. I went to School of Visual Arts in Manhattan.
Now you teach it, right?
Yes, I teach in the fine art department now.
Literally, the student has become the teacher.
Say it again?
I said, literally, the student has become the teacher.
Yeah. So I've been teaching there for about 20 years. And, they say that, invention is the mother, to an airplane. The whole idea about you're just going to keep inventing things until you can get it to fly. You can make things happen. So, I've always been that kind of person. I always wanted to get into stop motion animation. I love the whole Ray Harryhausen early stop motion stuff. The Will Vinton claymation, that was true claymation in those days. So one thing led to another, and then as the reputation of my studio grew, people would come to us and say, "Hey, we got this project. What can you do?" And the big problem with what they had at MTV was they were still making the characters completely out of clay when they came to me, and it's like it was just too heavy. It's like trying to animate a bowl of Jello. I mean, it was just too heavy.
So how big were they, just so we have like a frame of reference?
Sure. The characters were about 10 inches tall.
So 10 inches worth of clay, just stacked on top of each other with gravity, effectively.
Yeah, it would fall right over. It would fall right over. Yeah. A foam rubber puppet. In fact, I have a foam rubber puppet here from a second TV series that I did for Canadian television. So I'm going to show that to you in a second. And it's really funny because, like, before I show it to you, just to let you know, it's somebody's birthday today. He's very famous, but put him in there.
Yeah, give him a shout out, and then we can hopefully get him to listen.
Let's go this way with it. Do you know who that is? I'm guessing you do. Anybody?
Frankenstein?
Can you see him?
No, that's Terminator.
Oh, Schwarzenegger.
Oh, Schwarzenegger's birthday today. That's right, it is.
Yeah, he's 76. He looks young, doesn't he?
Oh,
Yeah.
So this is an example of a foam rubber puppet, and you can see he's kind of squishy. I can squish him.
Yeah.
And the best part about it is the wire in the arms. I could, manipulate it, and it stays. I try not to move these around too much because this character is probably almost 20 years old, and they start to break down because of the foam rubber that we use to make them. But yeah, it's his birthday today, and I saw him on the shelf, and I said, I got to pull this over and show it to you guys.
I appreciate that.
That's awesome.
How much does something like that weigh?
Oh, it's very light. What does this weigh? A pound,
Oh, wow.
maybe.
Yeah.
He also has a wooden base. You see how we bolt his feet down?
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's little bolts in his feet. Oh, his head, by the way, is not soft. It's hard. It's a hard plastic head.
Was that how it is with on the? So yeah, sorry about the call.
That's okay. Do you want me to get that?
Yeah, if you could. We can have a celebrity answer.
Yeah. How fun is that?
What a prank call.
So this character, I think Dee asked the question, or someone asked the question about the height. This character is almost 12 inches tall. So when I did a second series, we made the characters taller. We wanted to get more detail, especially in their face. So you could there he is. And the mouths are replaceable. They actually pop off. We could actually pop off the mouth and put on another little mouth to make them talk.
So now you say for a second series, are you talking about when MTV revived it via the Cup of Coffee guys? Were you part of that at all, or?
No, I was not. No.
Are you talking about the long toast?
I'm talking about it.
In 2006, 2007, MTV 2 came out with a new couple seasons using a Canadian company. It wasn't Eric Fogel, it was Cup of Coffee as the production house. And I didn't know if they, contacted you for any of the puppetry work or anything like that. I just knew that it was a Canadian production house that was in charge of it, not Eric Fogel. So that.
Yeah, no, I was not involved in that production at all. I did something before that, which again was similar to Celebrity Deathmatch. And if I'm not mistaken, the show you're referring to, I think Mark Hamill's name is on that project, unless I'm wrong.
Wrong Coast?
Wrong Coast, yeah.
Yeah.
Wrong Coast. That's also with Eric Fogel, and that was, Mark Hamill, Eric Fogel, MTV, post Celebrity Deathmatch nonsense.
No, we did another project just before the Wrong Coast project. And in fact, Mark was also involved in that, which was the first time I had met him. And we've worked together a couple of times since on different things. But I thought that's what that was. So this was also another show that was produced. Was produced by me, and I don't even know what the title is right now. It was, once you produce it, you let it go. It goes off into the land of Hollywood. I don't know if it's ever been seen. You might be able to find it on YouTube. I couldn't even tell you.
Okay.
Go ahead. Oh, I just lost my thought. Oh, okay, sorry. I got it back. Okay. So now with the how did you do the how did you get the puppets to look so well because a lot of those puppets were pretty on point. Most of them were very on point with what the celebrities looked like at the time. What did you use for did you do sneaky, like, go pretend mock interviews with the celebrity to get up close to him or something, or you just, pop into Google and get a whole bunch of reference images or something?
Yeah, the answer to that is it's actually simpler than you think. The nice thing about the internet, if you wanted to look at pictures of, for example, Leo DiCaprio, there's plenty of pictures, everything from straight on to 3/4 to profile. You can get all the pictures you want. And then it just comes down to the sculptor. Some of the early characters I sculpted myself, like the original Mills Lane, I sculpted. He was the, the guy that kept saying, let's get it on. He was he was the ref. And then I started hiring sculptors, and they were just very good at creating sculptures that were, let's see, the head size was about 2 inches in height out of clay. They were just very good at it, and then from there we would make a mold out of silicone, which is a soft substance.
Yep.
And the hard heads themselves were made out of plastic. We actually poured plastic into the silicone mold. So it just came down to the quality of the sculptor, being able to capture the face. I can tell you what faces were really difficult to capture. We tried to do Britney Spears once, and everybody in the studio took a crack at that, and it's like it just ended up looking like a little blonde girl's head.
I really did like big lips and like I read like didn't she have like bigger lips? Like the lips were a little bit more defined. I think in the episode.
Which character are you talking about?
The Britney Spears episode. I think like the lips were like defined. I think.
Yeah, I mean, everybody took a crack at trying to do, make the eyes bigger, make the lips bigger, make the nose, everybody was trying to find that one little facial gimmick that made you look at it and go, oh yeah, I see that's Britney Spears. What we ended up doing with the character was we tried to find the right dialogue and the right actress to do the voice.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask.
Sounded like her.
So did you guys, well, I mean, I guess that, I don't know if you guys, did you ever have any issues like Mills Lane, like he's a real person and he was a prominent part of the show. Do you know like how like the process of how MTV was able to get releases from all these, or were you kind of just like, I guess towards the end, maybe people were maybe wanting to be on it more so than in the beginning? It seems like that's how these shows go. Like as they get a little more popular, people start going to the producers and saying, hey, I want to be a part of this, as opposed to the beginning. Like, was there a lot of pushback from some like celebrities that didn't
I only know what I was told because I was not part of the producer team. And what I was told is that this all fell under a legal term called spoof, that you can spoof someone that is in the public
eye, effectively.
Because they kind of have like that public image, so it's kind of
Yes.
Okay.
That makes sense.
The only one I remember that there was some pushback on was we made a whole bunch of puppets for a Star Trek episode, and at the time the one they imitated was the one with Patrick Stewart, Next Generation.
Oh, okay.
And we made some great looking puppets. We had Captain Picard, and we had Data, and we had the Maria Surtees character. I mean, they looked spot on. They were so good. And the story I heard, I don't know how true it is, but all at once we would say like, well, when are you going to shoot this? And they said, well, we're not. We're just putting the puppets on the shelf because Patrick Stewart said, don't you dare make fun of me. So I don't know how true it is, but that was the story I heard. And honestly, you can't really blame him.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really fight with the guy who was knighted.
Yeah.
But it is good to hear that, there was no celebrity death match of your own that you had to worry about.
Yeah.
People trying to come after you.
But you got to remember also, he was a star in the Paramount sphere. He was big time. He's great now. He was great back then. And, he was working for Paramount. He had that kind of pull where he could just say, no, don't make fun of me. No. Which is a shame. I don't know if it's true or not. I wish they did shoot it. It would have been great. It would have been great. I'll tell you who I did meet. The only actor that I met that we made a puppet of was Leo DiCaprio. A friend of mine called me up at one day and said, I have a meeting with Leo DiCaprio tomorrow. do you have the puppet? And I said, well, if I had it, I can't give it to him because it's owned by Paramount. But I'll tell you what, I got the drawings here. I will make you an original face, and if you let me come over and meet him, and I'll give it to him. So they said fine, and we made a Leo DiCaprio the head, the character from the episode where, what is it, Jack Nicholson beats the hell out of him, I think. Was it with a golf club? I think there was it was in the news that
I remember that. Yeah,
Jack Nicholson had hurt somebody or hit him with a golf club. I don't know what the story is. So I got to meet Leo, and he was a real gentleman. And when I showed him the little character head, he turned into a child. It was like, oh my God, I love that episode.
So you actually saw it. That's even better. Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah, you never quite know how somebody's going to react. But he was like, oh, Jack Nicholson killed me. It was a lot of fun. He was a real nice guy.
If you're going to get killed by somebody, you get killed by Jack Nicholson.
Here's Johnny.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the only one that really sticks in my mind. Yeah, that's the one. That's the guy I got to meet, which was nice. It was so worth it. It was so worth it.
That's awesome. So how long would each one of these? We're kind of circling back to the production of everything. How long would each one of these little puppets? I'm sorry, I was going to call them figures, but puppets or characters. How long would each one take to create?
Yeah, we had about a 2-week turnaround to create a set of, let's say, 10 puppets, but all of them had duplicates, and a couple may have needed triplicate of. So in about 2 weeks' time, we would produce 25 puppets, give or take, and then at the end of 2 weeks, it would be like, okay, next set. We'd be making more. At the end of a month, we would probably do, I don't know, 50, 60 puppets, something like that.
But just an idea, one in particular puppet, to work on it, how long would it take? Was it just one person working on that puppet, or was it a couple of people working on it to make it go faster, like assembly line style?
Well, yeah, we actually did assembly line style for everything. We had one person, they would send us over illustrations, drawings of the characters. They used to call it turns, because we'd see the character on full front, maybe a 3/4, a profile, and then a posterior. And from the actual drawings, we would actually had somebody making the armatures, the wire pieces. We would actually sculpt the clay onto the wire armature so it was the exact size that we needed it to be. Then we'd have another person making the plaster molds, another person cleaning it out, another person casting the foam rubber, baking it, and then we'd have 2 or 3 people trimming the edges to get rid of the seams and painting them up. So when we started, it was just 2 of us, and by the time we finished after the, 4 years or so, I had a studio of about 20 people.
Okay. So I have a little bit of a question. I know that you mentioned that you've always been creative and you've always kind of had an interest in claymation. Was there a movie that stuck out to you about it? Was just something that Ray Harryhausen or Brian O'Willis? This is just something like King Kong from '33. That was my movie. Is there just something that really stuck out to you growing up and was this is why I want to do claymation?
Oh yeah, absolutely. See, here's the thing. I'm a little bit older than you guys, and back when I was in college, trying to find out information about how stop motion worked, how you built a model, how you animated it, how you did these other tricks where you had live action people and animated characters interacting. It was the biggest magic secret everybody kept. No one in Hollywood would tell you. You had to figure these things out on your own. There were very few publications about this. But as far as the actual visual is concerned, the original King Kong, animated by Willis O'Brien, and Marcel Delgado, that was the trigger. This looks more real than anything else you see. The dinosaurs look like real dinosaurs. I mean, not by today's standards, but but back then, Yeah, and then Ray Harryhausen, and
Yeah.
you could go right down to Phil Tippett's work on RoboCop 2, where the main giant RoboCop character is beating on the little RoboCop. I mean, the last like 20 minutes of the film is all stop motion, and it's still today, it looks outstanding. And there was no digital work back then. Everything was
No.
shot on film.
Yeah, practical effects. It's the way to go sometimes, practical effects.
I am there. I agree.
I know when we did an episode on the original King Kong. I know when we
Really?
when we covered it. I guess we did an episode on King Kong overall, but when we covered it, I remember just hearing about some of the different techniques used in order to do the claymation with the live action. How they would have different reels playing, and they would play over it on different reels, so this way they could have the live action with this, and it would all get burned into each other. They would have a film in the background on a sheet getting projected onto it, and again, it's nuts. So much work went into it, especially in the 30s, and they revolutionized a bunch of shit.
Yes,
But-
they did. They actually created not just visual processes, but they also created a sound process where they used multiple sound effects. For example, when the King Kong, the actual Kong character, growled, he roared. Nobody had this ever recorded before. Nobody really knew what a gorilla sounded like. So I believe it was Murray Spivak, who was the sound engineer for what was it? It wasn't 20th Century Fox, RKO Studios. He created this idea that he could take a lion, a tiger, and a bear and
Kind of
mix the three
yeah.
sounds together to get that roar. And it's like, by today, I mean, now everybody knows this, but this in 1933 was 90 years ago. Nobody knew that this idea that you could do this even existed. And he was the first to do it. Absolutely.
Interesting sound effect fact, but did you know the original Godzilla roar was done by taking a rosin glove and just running it down the strings of a cello bass?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. I remember I was reading about, I'm trying to think his name was Ben Burton, I think. Ben Burton, I think. He did the sound effects for the first Star Wars movie, and that exciting sound of the, what was it? One of the TIE fighters when it's coming in, it's like, that weird sound. Yeah, that's it. It was the microphone over a wire. Like he would just go outside and he'd like hit wires and things, coming off a lamppost, and he'd get that weird sound. I mean, that was the beginning of really great sound design. Now sound design is a big thing. It's a big industry.
It's huge.
Especially for anything animated with special effects or even live action too. Sound design is a huge industry. But back then they were inventing these ideas as they went along. I mean, the famous sound effect of the lightsaber.
That was a TV with magnetic feedback. If memory
It
serves.
sounds correct. Yeah.
I might be wrong.
Have you ever, off topic, have you ever watched those videos? They have the people that they're in their basement and they're just watching along to like a random movie, and then just doing the sound effects
with
like
the objects and
with
stuff.
random objects. They'll just use like a snare drum, they'll just to do whatever to mimic the sound effects. It's crazy how they match it up, and like that's what they were doing. Like you're saying, like they're just finding ways to match the sound. And now they
create sounds.
And now they just have like, parabolic mics everywhere, and they have, like these, boom mics and like all these different things that'll basically catch, like a pin dropping through the air. You'll hear it as it cuts through the air, almost, which is insane, but you're not using your imagination as much to create and get to get where you want to go. It's kind of just put a mic on and catch the sounds.
Yeah, I remember watching a YouTube video where basically had this round circular disc with different length metal rods going up, and it more or less created 90% of the horror sounds that people would hear, where you would like strum along the different metal rods to get different sounds, and it was nuts.
One of my favorite on horror films was the knife stabbing the cabbage.
Yeah.
It's like, we're killing you, and he's stabbing a cabbage. I mean, then you split it open, and it's like, it could be anything you want. There's a famous video. I don't know. You probably find it on YouTube somewhere. It's a famous video of the certain shots from the movie Alien, which was that was like 1980 or something. Like when one of the characters' head is crushed, they actually replaced the actor's face with a pumpkin, and it was just the guts of the pumpkin that went.
Yep.
So that was a great movie also that had a lot of groundbreaking effects, like when they first take off the face hugger and they looked inside to see what it looked like. You see all these looks like a very organic interior of the face hugger, and what that were the insides of clams. Like somebody ran across the street to to a seafood place, got all the fish parts and brought them over and put them in. And so they used all these great effects, anything very organic. I love things that are organic.
I guess, and that's probably why you doing the puppetry and like the and claymation and stuff. It's more organic than say like CGI and like
practical effects.
Way more. Because I was actually going to ask. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
Because I was actually going to ask, have you ever kind of played around with the other, like the computer effects and like the CGI type stuff, or like do you not really even want to like
strictly practical?
I've dabbled in it a little bit, and I believe it just has its place. I believe it depends on what kind of story you're trying to tell.
Yeah.
How realistic you need something to look. To me, it's all about the story. It's about the characters, what you're trying to tell. I believe I was watching something recently. I wish I could tell you what it was. It was an animated show on one of the streaming networks, and it was all about people. It was just people having conversations, and it was all high-end digital animation. And I thought, why? Why don't you just have people talk to people? Why are you going through all this time and expense to create people that are computer generated? So everything has its place. I think horror films play best when we know the actors. They're real people, and I like that a lot better than all the big special effects movies. I used to love them back in the day, but I'm kind of tired of them now. I like stories about people, no matter how, and the more crazy, the better. Oh, I'll give you an example. If you've seen The Whale with Brendan Fraser.
Oh, I heard about that. I didn't get a chance to see it. It was not.
What a great movie.
Yeah.
So just to give you a recap, it's Brendan was playing this main character who had basically, he was eating himself to death. He was very large, and Brendan was a very big guy, but to make him look even bigger, they created a fat suit. And there are times you're seeing a lot of flesh, and it's all practical. It looks amazing. You get a lot of sympathy for the character. You feel bad for him, and then as his story unfolds, you realize why he's doing to himself what he's doing. It's just an amazing movie. I would highly recommend it. It's such a great movie.
And it's cool because now you can get away with using an actor like Brendan Fraser and putting him in a suit and having these suits that look so realistic that you can do like a close-up shoot, and it like looks like you could believe that Brendan Fraser put on 500 pounds to play this part.
Well, using an MTV show is kind of a bring slightly back around with if you look at say like really early Jackass when they do the old guy pranks, where they get up in the old people makeup, versus like when he did Bad Grandpa, where he basically thought, that's an old dude, but before that it was like, oh yeah, those kind of passing glances, like, okay, yeah, that's an old guy, like
Yeah, then when you look, you're like,
it's kind of, but like then you see him in the movie, you're like, I wouldn't be able to, if I wasn't paying attention, I wouldn't be able to know his period.
Well, I mean, I think that also advances with time. I mean, as we covered with King Kong, back in 1933, like people thought that this was the pinnacle of everything. This is as good as claymation is going to be, as good as anything that's going to happen. I mean, then look at fast forward to Godzilla and how we started doing people in giant monster suits and things like that.
Yeah.
And then
it's all relative to the
yeah,
time.
it's fantastic just watching technology grow with it, especially the practical effects. I mean, CGI, we can go back and be like, all right, this is where it was bad. This is where it was good, and now it's starting to look bad again. I mean,
Because I think it's gotten so good that it kind of
it's
like when
off-putting. It's almost off-putting.
like what you were saying, Carl. It takes away from the actual human element because
Yes.
there is no human element anymore to it. It's just all so unbelievable and outside the scope of reality and something that could actually be something happening. So that it's that was put together by somebody who's behind the keyboard, making it happen through CGI. And I don't really I don't personally like movies like that either. I don't really watch Transformers and stuff like that. I don't really, because it's not real. I know it's not real, and I don't, to suspend my disbelief on certain things like that. I don't want I don't want it.
Oh, you want to see something? You want to see a great not real moment to Transformers? I think it's in the one where they go Age of Extinction. There's the security guard kind of in the foreground, and all of a sudden you see the giant robots burst out doing their thing, fighting, and the security guard doesn't react for a good solid 20 seconds because there's nothing for him to. I guess they didn't give him a mark or whatever, but for a solid 20 seconds, there's giant robots fighting 15 feet away from you, and you're not moving.
Yeah, because there's no reaction because it's through a green screen type.
So
no actual reaction to it.
So does that make James Cameron your least favorite director?
He did a lot of great stuff. His first Terminator was all puppets. They were mechanical pieces. He earned everything he's getting right now. There's a man who's been to the bottom of the ocean. He's been to a place no other human's ever been to. He earned everything he has. I have no problem with that.
So there is going to be no celebrity death match between you and James Cameron. This is what I'm hearing.
No, he would win. He'd kick my ass. He's got the height. He's got the reach.
Okay.
It's funny you mentioned King Kong.
A little short.
I'm sorry.
I feel like you're selling yourself a little short. I'm sure you got some tools.
You mentioned King Kong, which is again one of my favorites, and a funny story about King Kong, just to give you an idea of the way the media presents things. So in 1925 was the first real dinosaur epic that Willis O'Brien did. It was The Lost World.
Yeah.
And after that, they were trying to make another animated film that was more realistic. So they were working on something called Creation. That turned into King Kong. But around that same time, 1925, 1924, what happened was the producers were friends of famous magicians of the time, one of them being Harry Houdini. And he got hold of a sample reel, which only played on a projector for 1 minute. And it was some of the early dinosaur tests. And he brought it to the annual Magicians Convention held in New York City in 1924. And he said, I have something unique here, and I'm not going to tell you where I got it from, but he presented it, he played it. It had no sound, of course. It's 1924. And everybody was amazed. They thought it was real. They were real dinosaurs, really tearing each other apart, blood dripping all over the place. The blood, by the way, they used dark chocolate. They melted dark chocolate because that's what looked like blood in black and white. And what happened was I went back and I did the research and I found the New York Times article from the next day. And that's exactly what it said. I mean, I'm going back 100 years now. The New York Times article actually said these dinosaurs looked real. If they're a fake, they were a masterpiece and this and that. And then after pressure from the studio, they said, we better tell them what we did because it was creating a frenzy. But everyone, all the famous magicians thought it was real, including Harry Houdini.
Yeah. Well, that's like the old story where allegedly when people first went and saw the movie of the train coming straight at them, people freaked out because they thought the train was going to come straight at them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or the guy pointing the gun at the audience.
Yeah, it just changes a lot of things as time goes on. People aren't used to it, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure that had to be. I mean, think about it. If you're not used to seeing a lot back then, people might not have even had access to a TV in their house or something. They're
They
just
wouldn't have.
yeah.
There
So
was none. This
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah,
well, I'm saying like when you talk about the train coming at you and like the guns being pointed at you.
this is still pre-TV.
Yeah, this is still pre-TV when I did it.
Yeah,
TV
it was
was
all
on-
film
just
stuff.
like the sound of it or whatever.
Well, that and the fact that back during that time, they weren't able to actually capture a train coming at them until somebody initially did it, and that was all part of the film editing and the magic behind it. I mean,
You kind of probably have to sacrifice the camera too,
back then, yeah, I think that's what they had to do. But,
unless they had like a really fast gimbal or something.
I do have a question. Since you did a lot of research on King Kong, do you know the story behind the director and writer for King Kong, like Miriam C. Cooper? A little bit.
And Shodzak.
Yeah, but I mean more Miriam C. Cooper specifically because
He was a bit of an eccentric dude.
yeah, he was doing the research on that. I mean, if you haven't done any research on him, I would 100% look him up. He was in multiple world wars. He got prisoner of war twice. He was nuts. And he just, I'm fairly certain that he holds like one of the most interesting man in the world titles. It's nuts.
Yes, absolutely true. I have read about him.
Yeah.
He and his partner were documentary filmmakers
Yeah.
back when it was probably the craziest job you could have, because you would get on a boat, you'd go to a faraway land, you'd set up a camera, and you'd hope that the lion doesn't attack you. And you would have a guy there with a rifle, but if he missed, it was really dangerous in those days being a documentary filmmaker, going to areas of the world that were extremely hot or extremely cold. Yeah, he was the real deal.
Yeah, he even got attacked by pirates, Somalian pirates, when he was on his way to Ethiopia.
It's amazing they lived to tell such amazing stories.
It's nuts. It's
Yeah.
nuts.
It is. Did you ever see any of his early documentaries?
Miriam? No, I have not.
They did like something called, they tried to turn the documentary into like a narrative. Like they'll stick a woman in there, like, oh, she's the love interest. They did all sorts of crazy things to try to get Hollywood to buy into the great adventure. And it wasn't until they met Willis O'Brien and they said, oh, you could do all the dinosaurs and stuff. We'll just mix it up with our idea, and we could shoot everything right here on the back lot, which is what they did. I mean,
Yeah.
One of the best stories I have is like, we remember the big wall, the Great Wall of Skull Island.
Okay.
And basically, after they built this giant plaster and wood wall, after the movie, what do you do with it? Well, it was on the back lot for another decade. And then when they were shooting Gone with the Wind, they needed some shots of the burning of Atlanta. So
they used the wall.
yes, they dressed it up like a bunch of buildings. They lit it on fire, and that's the Great Wall. And if you look at it, thinking about the Great Wall, you go, "Oh yeah, that's the big door with King Kong came through." And so it's all there. I mean, they just create a lot of great history, and it's early Max Steiner film score, which is pretty amazing. Everybody remembers that.
Yeah.
So, interesting question.
Yeah.
Of like, say Miriam C. Cooper, Mr. Phil Tippmann, and like them.
So Phil Tippett was and still is, stop motion guy. Miriam C. Cooper was just the director for King Kong.
Well, I meant like of like some of these like past like who would you
Stop motion legends?
Yeah, like stop motion legend, like directors of like Miriam C. Cooper, or guys who do the work for it, like who would you want to work with the most, or like if you have or haven't, and not like
Who's your hero? Who's your top 10? Who's the guy that you don't just want to avoid?
Actually, I have a piggyback question off that, so I'll let you answer that, and then I got a piggyback one that I was going to ask you.
Well, unfortunately, my favorites have passed on. Harryhausen is no longer with us. A little-known character by the name of Pete Peterson. I think I got his name right. He worked on Mighty Joe Young with Ray Harryhausen and Willis O'Brien. And O'Brien was in charge of making all the puppets and figuring out all of the multiple screen projections so we could put live action people in the same shot with stop motion puppets. And let's see, a lot of that stuff was built by Marcel Delgado, a brilliant man. I would have loved to meet these guys. I've never met any of them. I mean, out of all the idols we have, and we all have a lot of idols, the only idol I've ever met was Stan Lee, which was a lot of fun because I actually pitched him a project. I went to Hollywood. My agent got in touch with his agent. This was I guess it was about 20 years ago, and he was still working with a company. I don't remember what it was called. They created their own project. They created something called Stripperella. It was an animated show. Nobody remembers Stripperella?
Yeah, it was on Spike TV. Yep.
Yeah, I think so. But, having to met Stanley was great. I showed him some of my animation. He said, boy, this is great. He was always full of energy. I mean, he was probably, let's see, 20 years ago, he was probably in his late 70s at the time. And he was still full of energy and vigor. And he said he loved it. And we shook hands and nothing ever came of it. But, how many of us really get to meet our idols, right?
Yeah.
We try to, and then sometimes it doesn't happen.
Wait, can I guess what the pitch was? Were you trying to redo a live action Howard the Duck?
Oh,
I remember that. I remember that movie. That was just the biggest disaster I've ever seen.
It had in the first 30 seconds there was duck breasts. What? Why? In the bathtub.
You see, no, this is a perfect example of a character that should be CG. Because of the shape of the character, it would be so problematic to turn it into, get it to work as a puppet, or you can't put a person in a costume. They did. They put a very small person into this costume for some shots.
The Ewok, though.
And it was just, the Ewoks had going for them was the design. They knew how to design a character that was so cute, they could turn it into a toy, which is, what Lucas was brilliant at, Like he wanted the Ewoks to be, toys. And it certainly worked.
So to kind of piggyback off of what Dee had asked, what completely live action movie would you love to have the opportunity to make into stop motion, either claymation or puppets?
Oh, what live action movie from the past that I would love to turn into a stop motion project?
Yeah. Or
Or even a TV show, like a TV show
or a comic, like
like a comic. Because the other thing that I was going to ask you is, have you ever thought of turning Spontanea into, from the pages onto onto the screen?
Oh, okay. I'll answer that part first. Actually, yes. So I've created a lot of what we call pitch projects. So you come up with a whole Bible that has the characters, the designs, the story. It has all the backstory. And in my career, I've spent thousands of dollars creating these pitch projects, or the Bible of a project, and then you pitch it. I've been to Disney and Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Warner Brothers. I've pitched projects on the East Coast, the West Coast. And once in a blue moon, you get a project off the ground. But if you don't, what do you do with all that material that you created that cost you thousands of dollars and it cost you a lot of time and energy? It usually just goes up on a shelf. So my idea for Spontanea was to create a pitch project, but to turn it into a comic book. So in the event I can't sell it, I can always market it as a comic book and a graphic novel eventually. And that would allow me to, amortize and make some of my money back. But yeah, I would love to see Spontanea as a traditionally animated film. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, nowadays with stuff like that, though, you can kind of try, maybe taking those and just turning it into a basic Kickstarter too. A lot of people are going that route these days and trying to go through the. I'm not saying that's what you whether or not.
Yeah, so yesterday I know that we talked about Joel Haber, I can't pronounce his last name. He effectively kick-started getting Mystery Science Theater 3000 back on TV through Netflix, through a Kickstarter, and then again on the Gizmoplex
And even
in 2022. So
even if it doesn't get funded, it still also shows producers that there's possible interest in the thing too.
A lot of toy companies are doing that. Sorry, a lot of toy companies do that. They'll kind of
That's the word,
poke at.
crowdfund. Why did I?
Crowdfunding. Yeah, they'll kind of hint at the drop of a toy, and then if they get a certain amount of people to throw $500 or whatever, then they release this huge. I don't know. My buddy did it. He got a crazy what's the ship from Star Wars? I don't know.
Oh, you're talking about
Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, the Millennium Falcon. Or no, whatever the big one is. I don't know, the round one.
Oh,
Death Star.
I think the HasLabs
Death
thing
Star.
that Tom was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a crowdfund thing where they just kept collecting money, and then I guess they used that money to create the thing.
Self-produce.
Yeah.
Effectively.
So I don't know. I guess that's what you.
Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I was like. I mean, they're and nowadays with the internet and stuff, that has now become a more almost viable option in terms of either getting your name out there with this idea, or and not that you have a hard time getting your name out there considering your what you have on your belt. You've also worked on Queen of the Damned, which is cult, underground cult kind of thing. Okay, movie.
It's kind of it's a hit and miss. I've done a couple of Kickstarter things with other people, and it's hit and miss. You have to put a lot of effort in the planning stage. You have to put a lot of effort in to create a marketable video that really captures the essence of what you're trying to do and sell yourself just right. And then you have to do the whole campaign. And at the end of the campaign, wow, we only raised $5,000. It wasn't worth the amount of trouble you're looking for. What I'm looking for is an established producer who will see the value in something like Spontanea. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm doing everything grassroots. Eventually, probably in the next couple of months, I'm hoping to secure a deal to turn into a trade paperback. We have 6 issues complete. It's a full story arc. So, a trade paperback could be 175 pages. That could get into your Walmart. It could get into, your libraries. That's what I'm looking to do. I'm looking for the right producer to come to me and license the product and get it made. I'd love to animate, love to direct it. I'd love to produce it, but these things don't always go that way. Sometimes you just have to license it away, and then you cross your fingers and you hope that they do justice to your baby. Look at Lost in Space. Lost in Space was a TV show I grew up watching as a child, and it was one of my all-time favorites. It had the greatest robot and spaceship and ray guns and creatures, and then finally they get to make that feature film. I don't know if you remember. I'm thinking it was about 1990s was their feature. I thought that was one of the worst features I've ever seen. It had a lot of cool stuff, but it was such a poorly written script. And now Netflix has a whole new series. Again, they're in the second or third season, I think, of another version of Lost in Space. I think it's good for what it is. It's not my Lost in Space. So, but I would love to see Spontaneous, an animated TV series, a weekly thing in a traditional cartoon animated format, not CG, not live action. Could be live action, but we can always wish for the best,
So speaking of live action, I'm not sure if you did mention it or if we kind of just switched over to Spontanea being a live action and turning from the page to the screen. Is there a particular live action movie that I don't know if you did answer? I'm sorry if I missed it, but is there one that you would want to turn something that's I don't know. I feel like maybe Curb Your Enthusiasm would be cool if it was Arrested Development or something like that. It'd be cool to see them as claymation or stop motion or something like. Do you have something like that you would love to work on?
Honestly, no. I think a show like Curb Your Enthusiasm was so good at what it was I think it would almost be a shame to turn into anything animated. I think what makes it work is the main character. He's such an amazing character, and he's such a great actor, and he's involved in the producing and the writing. And I think it would be a shame to turn that. I'll tell you what I do miss. I'll tell you, maybe this answers your question better. When I went to film school many years ago, before all the stuff that we've been talking about over the last 20, 30 years, we used to see a lot of animated shows, and animated short films from the 20s and the 30s. And some of these are so amazing, but they were in black and white. The sound quality is terrible. It's hard to get a sophisticated, even very young audience interested in these films. And I'll give you an example of some. The Fleischer brothers, Max Fleischer and his brother, forget his name, their studio produced films like the early Betty Boops. They also created musical pieces, like Cab Calloway did musical numbers with Betty Boop. These were amazing short films. They're only 5-6 minutes long, but they're amazing. And if there was a way to take the original soundtrack, use the digital magic to clean it up, Cab Calloway is just as good today as he was 100 years ago. When he did a Betty Boop cartoon.
We actually listen to that often in the shop next.
Oh, really? With Minnie the Moocher?
I don't know about Cab Calloway specifically,
No,
but yeah, we put on a lot of classics.
Well,
Nice.
Cab Calloway Reefer Man is one of my. I love that song.
Of course you do.
I mean, it was just amazing stuff. But the thing is, see, you guys know this, but how many little kids or even people who are in their late teens or early 20s know who this is? And I'm telling you, it's very, very few. When I do a pop culture con, people like yourselves recognize my work. People in their 20s, 30s, 40s go, Celebrity Deathmatch, I remember that. But in the days that I teach college, I mention shows like Celebrity Deathmatch, and these are 18, 19, 20-year-old students. They don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a shame because it was so good.
It doesn't hold the same street cred as it does with us older folks.
Oh, I had kids at work who don't know what Dragon Ball Z is.
Yeah, really.
Anime.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess it's just, they're just looking at other things. They're just distracted by all these other things that they don't really, know.
It's all instant gratification.
It's all, but it's weird because a lot of the kids now, what is now, and like the past, it's like, if it's the past, they don't really pay attention to it. It's like, it's what's in front of them, and that's the best. And it's like, that's their argument. It's now. This is the best because it's happening now.
Or if they do have interest in it, it's because they're just getting clips of it through like TikTok or YouTube
Yeah.
Shorts.
Again, instant
Right.
gratification.
Yeah, and that's how they get there. But then even then, they're like, oh, well, somebody will do a sample of it, or they'll mix it into like, or it'll become a meme, and then they'll be like, wait a minute, that's the origin of it? Nah, this, guy from like, that came out 2 years ago, this guy made it. It's like, no, this was before you were even born, like before this guy was even born, like he's sampling this. They don't even get that. They just think it's just now is now.
The next shit.
And I don't know if you've ever seen any of the later Max Fleischers when he did the Superman animated series.
Oh, those are phenomenal. We used to have VHSs of those.
They're so good. I mean, there's not much in the way of sound quality, but it's got the music and it's got the characters, and like I like the new animated stuff that they're doing with the DC world, the Superman, Batman, but I'm not crazy about it. But that whole airbrushed look that they were doing back in the 40s, wow. I mean, do you realize that stuff is 80 years old and it's spectacular looking? Giant robots fighting Superman. I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah. It just doesn't happen these days.
I think you got to look for it. Once in a while, these little things pop up, and you got to give it a lot of attention. I was watching a TV series just recently called The Expanse.
What's that on?
It's I think it's on Amazon, but I could be wrong. It's like they've got like 5 seasons of it, and it's so good. It's great science fiction.
I don't know. So
Sky Captain. Sorry. Oh my God.
this guy's kind of
Because the Fleischer Supermans and the movie Sky Captain, they ripped a lot of that Superman.
Yeah, the robots, right?
Yep, they ripped the robots from it.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
I mean, there's a whole feature film that was literally, practically created in one sound studio with green screen, famous actors walking in and out every day, and then he did all the digital work. I mean, it's kind of brilliant what he pulled off on a very low budget. I mean, he had money, but still, it was a low budget.
and a lot of a lot of these things that I guess
Sorry
even
about
like South Park and like all these early things, the budget on some of these things and the stuff that they were able to put together and the time frame, like certain things like that, like South Park did talk about how like it took them like 30 minutes, 45 minutes they would put together an episode.
Yeah.
But like just like the budgets that they were working with, that they created, like the stuff that they were able to create with the budgets. Now,
Yeah, it was all from basically construction paper initially.
yeah, and like that's like you were saying, like you were the person with like the construction paper, like creating stuff like that, and like that's the stuff that like now like you created so many crazy things out of it, but like now it's all like a CGI and nobody puts any time and effort into it. But it's just amazing how things would be able to put together on such a low budget. Now people are like, you only spend $10,000 on that. There's no way it'll be in the screens. Like a movie like Clerks, they spent like I think it was like $35,000, and it was all like shot in like 2 or 3 different locations, and like it's people love that movie, and like they just created a whole entire franchise out of that, and like it just on low budget things that just built off of that organically. And
That's a perfect example of what built Kevin Smith's career, was starting with Clerks. It's absolutely brilliant, and he did it on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see him directing some big live action, superhero movie. I'd love to see him do Howard the Duck. I think it would be great. What is he working on?
Superman.
yeah, he almost got Superman, but he had a part of I guess he had a part in the new He-Man reboot, right?
Yeah, so he did Masters of the Universe, which is Netflix's new He-Man thing, but it focuses more so on everybody else, not so much He-Man.
I enjoyed it.
It's hit or miss. As long as you go in not thinking that like this is your kid's He-Man when you were growing up. Then.
Yeah, right.
Well, I considering a lot of the original episodes, if you watched them, were very just kind of kitschy, just action figures beating the crap out of each other with not much of a real substance of a plot.
Yeah.
It does give a lot more character depth to just action figures punching each other. I'm just saying, my opinion. It was hit or miss, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm sorry.
I do want to bring it back to what we were initially talking about, the Celebrity Deathmatch.
Sure.
Do you guys have a favorite episode?
Well, actually, I don't really have a favorite episode. I do have one of the things that I do really enjoy about Celebrity Deathmatch is the setup of each match. It wasn't just like, all right, on this episode we have 2 people. They don't really have a reason to fight. They don't have anything like that connects them. There's no common bond. I love that it was always like, like the Loch Ness Monster versus Bigfoot, or like it was like Charles Manson versus Marilyn Manson, or like it was always like the connection. Like there's a theme, and that was like a big part of, I think, what was like the draw to it, because it was always like, oh, I wonder who they're going to pit against each other this week, or like how can they like spin these 2 people together to make it like like who's the villain and who's the good guy, and like it was just crazy to see how like
Why are they battling? Why are they fighting? Yeah.
exactly, and then like the storylines and like all the different like all the different like talk like dialogue between the 2 different fighters and stuff. I mean,
The fighters, the hosts, the interviewers.
I know that's not really like that wasn't really part of your like actual like side of it all, but like you created each character, and like you got to see that like firsthand, and like like what they were doing and stuff, and like I'm sure you had an idea of like what was going to happen along the way. But, like I think that was just like the coolest part of all of it. Like who are they going to pit against each other next, and how are they going to?
I mean, for a while, it was like during the initial runs, I think it was like once a celebrity was dead, they were in the universe dead, one show back up. Yeah, for a while on the show, I think that's how they initially played it too.
I remember the I remember making the Loch Ness Monster. That was a challenge because they wanted it to scale with the puppet. So if a puppet was 10 inches tall, the Loch Ness Monster was he was like 20, 30 inches long, and we had to make it in parts because it couldn't fit in the oven. And we had to glue it together, and that was quite a challenge. But I love that character. It was just way too big to really animate. Because think in terms of this: if your character is 10 inches tall, how big is your set behind it? It's got to be pretty big. So that could take up a whole room, which means they can't shoot anything else, until you're done with that shot.
That's also interesting. The set behind it too. So, did you guys create the set, or was that something? Because like there
Were
was
you
like,
strictly puppets?
because the set behind it, like the stuff behind it, like the fans and everything, like that's like the crowd, like it was all pretty intricate. Like the announcers and everything. Like it wasn't just they were set up in a barn and nothing was happening around it.
Yeah, so early on, we did a couple of set pieces, and then it became very obvious that the show was growing exponentially. So I said at some point, look, I can't do the sets too. If you want the puppets, if you want this many puppets this quickly, let me just do puppets.
Mhm.
So, and the funny thing is, you were asking about the bodies of the other characters. They would repaint them at MTV and turn them into characters in the stand. They became spectators that were killing each other or whatever they were doing. But we pretty much stayed with the production line that we created for the show, and it worked out pretty well. I never missed a deadline.
That's a good thing.
Yeah,
That's always a good thing. Yeah, no, that's great, especially with how many puppets had to be made and the timelines in between. Like people are like, oh, you got 2 weeks, but not when you're dealing with like each thing it's a delicate material that you're working with. You have to, each one has to be, like they all have to look the same. It's not simple. It's not easy to create 10 of the same things that look exactly the same. It's easy to produce 1 or 2, but when you have to do 10 or 12 and they all have to be identical, it gets tedious.
Yeah, absolutely. Because they're different camera setups shooting the same scene, different animators, and everything had to work together. So yeah, there were moments it was pretty crazy. I'll admit there were times, but good times, as they say.
Yeah, especially in the beginning, because like you said, in the beginning it was just you and another person.
Right.
Maybe you and 2 other people or whatever as the team was growing. But still, in the beginning, I'm sure it was a lot of like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? We got a deadline and we're crazy far behind.
So really.
But that's great. It's awesome that you didn't miss, and that that's part of your reputation. That's why you have the reputation to be amazing at what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Not to cut it too short, but I do have to contact my my editor who's in South Africa. Their hours are different than ours. So you guys got any more questions? Let's run through it and
rapid fire.
Yeah, I have one more. If somebody is looking to break into the industry, they have an idea, they have something, how would you advise them or point them, guide them to go about getting into the field of
I would say find your niche, find out what you specifically are really good at, and find the way to pursue it. Maybe that means art school, maybe it means art college, maybe it means if it's writing, it's got to be that unique that unique style. It's got to be a very special idea. I'm constantly reinventing myself as well. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Comic book kid publishing, Spontanea. I'll tell you this, you might find this interesting. So, for any of your comic book graphic novel followers, trying to come up with an original character name was one of the most difficult things I ever had to do.
Oh my God.
I originally had like one character name, and my lawyer said, well, you can't use it because Marvel has a trademark on it.
Yeah,
and I said, but my character is different than this and that. And it's like, well, listen, you don't want to go up against Marvel. You don't want to go up against DC. So I spent about a week and a half Googling every name I could think of, the names of gods, goddesses, planets, solar systems, chemicals, brain function. I looked up, like, I was trying to come up with like that really cool name, like Jackpot. Oh wait, that is a comic book character. Everything I came up with, either DC or Marvel already had a trademark on.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking, did they own the English language? Like how do you come up with an original name if they own everything? It's like Good Luck. Oh, there is a character called Good Luck. Yeah, I mean, everything Harlequin. Oh, wait, there is a Harlequin. So I was constantly Googling stuff and trying to figure out what I could use. And ultimately, so this ties in with the answer to your question is you got to find the niche. And for me, the niche was I had to create a name so that I know nobody had it. And the idea was that the character, Spontaneous, she shows up when she's needed most. And it ties in with the concept of the character. And I looked up Spontanea, and believe it or not, I actually found a couple. there's a hip hop band in Japan that's no longer a group. They're no longer together, but they were called Spontanea. So my lawyer looked up this stuff as well, and he said there's no connection whatsoever. We're good to go. You got the trademark. It took a solid year to get the trademark up and running. But hey, I own it. Marvel, DC, you can't have it unless you pay me.
So I got two.
Yeah.
Sure. Two real quick ones. One, some of the puppets had to have like nude sequences. Did you ever have to feel kind of weird making the nude characters? Was it like kind of like a little awkward, like, oh, okay, now I gotta make Paris Hilton naked because she's known for being naked apparently. I think she got naked in her sequence at one point. Was that like an awkward thing for you, or you're just like, all right, whatever, I have to do it. It's for the story.
Well, the design actually came from MTV. They sent us the actual design. And, I come from an art world, and, we put it in front of the sculptor, and we go, this is what you're making out of clay, and that's what he did.
Right,
do I feel weird about it? You know what? I didn't have to animate it, and I didn't have to, that's a little awkward. No, it never bothered me. It never does. Art is art,
All right, second real quick one. Was there any celebrity that you really wish you did get to do, but you didn't get to? Like they didn't come up, that just never appeared in the story that you're like, oh, I really wish I could have made him for it or her?
I would say back then, no. I mean, in today's world, you could probably think of a dozen people you love to do. I mean, look at the popularity of trying to think of her name. She was Harley Quinn. She's the Barbie actress now.
Margot.
Yeah, I mean, who would not want to make a puppet of her?
Well, I guess that re-answered the last question too.
And then I have one final question, I guess, to kind of wrap us up.
I had a question. I was going to ask it, but I really want to because I'm like.
Okay, let's do it.
Go ahead.
This is not even a real question. It's just because I'm a freaking child. But have you ever dreidel made it out of clay?
Sure. I'm sorry, that was the question?
It was just a joke.
Because of the song Dreidel, 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 I Made You Out of Clay,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't a funny question. It was just, I don't know. I'm a child. So a real question from a real reporter.
Totally not, but basically, yeah, I'm just going to ask, would you be willing to come on again and, it doesn't have to be Celebrity Deathmatch. We could just talk about anything. We've covered Marvel. We can talk about DC. Anything that you want to talk about. Would you be willing to come on again?
Absolutely. Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, we definitely I had a great time talking to you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed
Sorry
talking
about
to
the
us.
phone calls.
Yeah. And I have a pitch for you next time. I know we don't have time. But
very cool. Okay.
If you just want to do one last plug again on Spontanea, or
or
pretty much any of your work. I know that you've directed a couple things, you've written a couple things that we never really got to actually talk about.
Okay.
Go ahead. Do one last little plug.
So Spontanea is our character. My company is Comic Book Kid Publishing. I'm very easy to find on the internet. I'm one of those people you can put my name in and a lot of things will come up over the last 20, 30-year history. Spontaneity can be found on Amazon, or you can go directly to my website, which is comicbookkidpub.com. And I would be happy to autograph it and mail it out to you. And if you want to find me, I do a lot of local pop culture cons. I will be at Sayville Summerfest next weekend. And let's see, I'm lining up my fall schedule. Hopefully I'll be at the, did you know that there's a New York horror convention that was just created?
Yeah.
I'm hoping I could get in there. That would be a lot of fun.
That'd be cool. I think you'd be a good guest for that, given,
Very cool. Thank you.
The gore and everything.
Green at the dam.
Kind of like, yeah.
All right, you know where to contact me. Let's keep in touch. Something cool comes up, and we'll do this again.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah,
so much
or-
for your time.
Awesome, man.
Or if you
Thank you
want
very
to
much.
suggest something for you to come on, and you're like, hey, I just really wanted to talk about something cool.
Nice. Will do. Okay, gentlemen, thank you very much. Jackson, Garrett, and Dee, thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Yeah, have a good night. And,
Good night.